New reporting today about an increase of Russian men trying to enter the U.S. by crossing the border with Mexico. Vice News' Paola Ramos followed Russian men in Mexico who are fleeing Putin's military draft.
По группам мы смотрим, сколько здесь людей, да, мы в шоке.
Как и везде, встречаем в магазинах, в отелях.
Mariana and Maxim?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Did you ever imagine, since the very first day you stepped out of your home in Russia, that you would finally come here?
It was our dream, and step by step, now we're here.
Joining us now, Paola Ramos. She is also an MSNBC contributor. Paola, that was some fascinating stuff. It's great to see you. So how are Russians traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border?
So the typical journey entails a flight from Russia. Then they go to Istanbul. From Istanbul, they'll take a flight to Cancun. In Cancun, many Russians are able to go there with a tourist visa. So then they eventually make their way to the U.S.-Mexico border. And I think, at the end of the day, they're going through the very same patterns and experiences that many asylum seekers and migrants go through, right? Which is these extraordinary lengths to reach the U.S.-Mexico border with this intention of seeking political asylum. But what we found, Jose, at the U.S.-Mexico border is that Russians, as you can see there, have more resources and more money to mostly spend their days inside motels, hostels, hotels. They lay low, right? They don't want to become victims of the cartels. And so that is sort of, one of the trends that we found, that they make their lives inside these hostels as their life is in limbo.
So many questions here, Paola. So they go to Cancun. So clearly the vicissitudes are different than what you've covered so eloquently and so brilliantly. The people that have to go through the Darien jungles and up through Colombia and through Central America and into Mexico and then to the United States, or the Cubans who for 62 years have been getting on inner tubes and rafts to try and reach freedom, or the Haitians who are getting on boats because the island is completely unlivable in so many ways.
Of course.
But there are differences here, Paola.
That's right. Of course, they have a completely different sort of migrant experience from the ones that you and I are used to talk about, right? And one of the questions I had is why the U.S.-Mexico border? Why go thousands of miles away from Russia? And what they would tell me is that this route to the U.S.-Mexico border is increasingly becoming one of the only and safest options for those Russian men that are trying to dodge the draft, right? What they told me is that Russia's neighboring countries don't feel safe. They told me that the Baltic nations have, of course, closed the borders to a lot of Russians, and that even getting visas to EU nations is not just difficult, but it's very costly. And so they have figured out that this route to Mexico is cheaper in a sense, it's safest, and again, they can navigate the country as tourists. So, of course, that is a very, very stark contrast to other asylum seekers.
And it seems that they may be treated differently once they get to the U.S. side asking for asylum?
Absolutely. I think from what we noticed on the ground, right? I mean, many of them are spending up to 3 to 4 months sort of in limbo in these dangerous, Mexican border towns, but they eventually do seek asylum, right? But I think the image at the U.S.-Mexico border right now is pretty stark, right? At least since October, more than 17,000 Russians have been processed, right? That's a pretty big number. So these border towns are starting to look different. 17,000, at least 21,000 since October, compared to at least a little bit over 4,000 in all of fiscal year 2021. And so Russians are there, right? It's an image that I believe, Putin doesn't want people to see, right? Which is his own men fleeing his draft, fleeing his empire, going to the West, right? That is something that he doesn't want anyone to see.